Welcome to the Recruiters Network live stream on inclusive hiring. My name is Jason Buss. For those of you that this is your first Recruiters Network event, I wanted to give some quick context on the organization. We were founded 10 years ago and focus specifically on professional development and continuing education for recruiting professionals, as well as providing a platform to allow recruiting and talent acquisition professionals to build their networks regionally. We've had over 40,000 recruiting professionals attend our in-person conferences. And obviously we're sheltering in place in 2020. So we're excited to bring you another webinar timely topic. So if any of you would like, you can sign up to receive any future announcements on our website at www.recruiters.network. I also wanted to provide a quick thank you to AllyO, our sponsor for today's webinar. They share our commitment to advancing the talent acquisition profession. So thank you, AllyO, for that. A couple of quick housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar, so we'll be sending the link out after. You'll receive that later on this afternoon. And we've received several questions that we'll be asking our panelists today. But we also encourage you to ask questions in the chat in the live Q&A throughout the event. And Tiffany, our moderator, will be posing those questions and we'll respond to as many as we can get. And the last thing I wanted to mention is we are going to be asking several polls throughout the webinar. So we just ask that you answer and participate openly so you can see where other organizations are at related to inclusive hiring and get a sense for challenges and again, how that compares to other attendees. With that, I want to turn it over to our moderator today and thank all of our panelists, Tiffany Keel.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you having me back again. As he mentioned, my name is Tiffany Keel and I'm an advisory board member for Recruiters Network. Previously served here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area on the advisory board for Minnesota recruiters. I'm also actively involved with the state HR council for Minnesota, so Minnesota SHRM, as well as working here in Minneapolis-St. Paul in leadership roles in HR and specifically talent acquisition. And I'm very happy to be here today with our esteemed panel. And with that, I will turn it over to the panel so we can get to know them. And we'll start with Mr. Torrin Ellis.
Good morning to you, Tiffany. I appreciate you and the entire team for pulling this conversation together. So for those of you who do not know who I am, diversity strategist, risk mitigator, I consult with a number of organizations to help them to optimize their talent acquisition process through the lens of executive leadership and diversity. I have a show on SiriusXM titled Career Mix, podcast Crazy and the King with my dear pod partner, Julie Sowash, and author of Rip the Resume.
Fantastic. Thank you, Torrin. Next on our panel, we have Cindy Class.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you all today. I'm really honored to be part of this discussion. So I lead diversity and inclusion at MongoDB. They've been at the company just about to be a year. And prior, I led diversity and inclusion for the finance division at Prudential Financial. I have over 10 years experience in board capacity in DE&I nonprofit work while I was developing my career on Wall Street and led a lot of initiatives, affinity groups, in that space during my career in fixed income finance. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation, looking forward to listening and learning with my fellow panelists as well. And thank you again.
Thank you, Cindy. We're excited to have you. Next, we have Carla Talley. So Carla, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Talley. I'm currently the manager of inclusive leadership at Kraft Heinz. I've been working in the D&I space for the last 8.5-ish years between being in the college or university space and then corporate America. And I'm a huge promoter of knowing better and doing better every day. So really excited to be a part of this conversation with everyone.
Thank you, Carla. Absolutely love that. Know better, do better, be better. Right on. Before we dive into the questions for our panelists, we do have our first poll. As Jason mentioned, we will have a couple of these throughout our conversation. So Jason, if you'll go ahead and post that first poll question. As an HR and talent acquisition professional, one theme I have heard on DE&I recruiting is a desire to not lower the hiring bar. Yes or no? Have you heard that? Yes or no? And Jason will post the results as soon as we've got majority of responses. And this is a question that we will address as well. Interesting. So the majority of those who have responded have heard that as we talk about DE&I and recruiting, there's a desire to not lower the hiring bar. So as I mentioned, we will tap into this question and talk a little bit about it. So thank you, Jason. Into the questions we go for our panelists. And Carla, this one we'll start with you here. So most hiring leaders will say they're committed to inclusion, diversity, equity, yet many will also say they don't want to lower the bar when hiring. What is your response and what advice do you have for our talent acquisition professionals when this comes up?
So I was actually pretty surprised that only 65% of folks said that they have heard that, because I honestly hear it everywhere. And I am not a talent acquisition professional by trade, but working in DE&I and working with talent acquisition leaders, I hear it quite often. I personally feel that these are two completely different things. And I like to remind people that there can be two truths. So when people are saying this, when they're saying they don't want to lower the bar, you're saying that you don't believe that Black, brown, queer, whoever, people are as intelligent as the white majority. And this should honestly be removed from your mindset, and something that I've been working with the TA teams that I've been with for over the last 4 years, being able to really say that we know, being able to rephrase that and saying that, like, we're looking for the best talent. That's period. And then and being specific about we are looking for diverse talent, period. Lowering the bar is very much saying what you're lowering the bar is saying that you are already in your mind saying that you don't believe that there are certain groups who are at the level that you want or feel that they need to be. And that's rarely ever true. It's just that you're not digging hard enough to find them. So those are just two separate truths. It's just, you need to be able to say, we want the best talent, end of story. And being able to tell other folks when they are saying we don't want to lower the bar, to be able to say, like, hey, I need you to know there's, some additional context behind that, and really dig into it a little bit deeper. It's a call out or in moment that other people like to say. I just say call out because I do calling out with care. So making sure that people really understand that there is no lowering the bar just because you are being more inclusive or you're being more diverse, and also knowing what diverse means in that standpoint, because then you can pinpoint, like, you're saying that you don't believe that Black people are as intelligent or as wise or whatever it might be.
Great insight, Carla. Cindy, the same question for you as far as talent acquisition, DE&I, when we're faced with that question or the statement, lowering the bar, what are your thoughts on that, and how do we address it?
Yeah, sure. So to add to what Carla has just begun to unpack on this term, for those of you in the poll who answered you've never heard this, in my experience, all you have to do is mention diversity or diversity recruiting and wait about 5 seconds, and someone in the room is going to mention it or respond with, we don't want to lower the bar. That's kind of been my experience. So this to me it's loaded in a limiting phrase, and we can unpack it further. Many people hear this phrase and end up adopting it, not knowing fully what it entails and what it evokes. And then you have others who say it fully knowing the assumptions that they're inherently promoting when you use this catchy but harmful phrase. I call this a classic DE&I strawman argument 101, point blank. And I feel strongly it's a practitioner's job to help everybody help dismantle that phrase, because it's not winning and it's not additive. And there's a few things to appreciate around the phrase. I mean, it definitely, first, as Carla pointed out, it presumes talent from underrepresented groups are not qualified. It also promotes that lowering the bar is like a prerequisite to attain diversity. It can't be done any other way but by lowering the bar. It positions high standards as contrary to advancing diverse representation, as if these things are mutually exclusive, like they can't possibly coexist. And it's a passive way of saying, as Carla pointed out, majority cultures are the only ones who could meet this high standard, which we know is not true. It inadvertently also promotes, which is very concerning, when we do actually successfully hire talent from underrepresented groups, that they were hired for the wrong reasons, to fill some goal or some quota and meet some benchmark, as opposed to the value they bring to the organization. The reason that's harmful is it doesn't position those who are hired for success, because now they feel tokenized, there's a perception around them, and it really positions them for failure within their onboarding from day one, okay? If people feel like that's how they got their roles. Plus, nobody wants to be hired for that reason. They want to be hired because you thought they were good at the job and can bring value. When said by a leader, it's extremely harmful because it's demonstrating and role modeling a behavior that's not desirable that ends up being contagious, especially if someone heard it from a leader, and it's disengaging. You know, and by the way, you'll note that it only comes up when we talk about diversity recruiting. I've never heard it come up when we just talk about recruiting. So most people don't realize that it's not additive to how they show up as a leader, and I have found that the leaders who have heard me lay out these points fully appreciate and gain the newfound understanding and choose not to use it in their rhetoric any longer.
Thank you, Cindy. And Torin, in your experience partnering with organizations, talent acquisition teams, what advice do you have to address this, or how can we as talent acquisition professionals, from your point of view, address this issue or this question or statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think we address it head on. First and foremost, Carla and Cindy said it, you know, they said it best. And, you know, for me, it goes by the statement of Martin Luther King. He said the two most dangerous things in our planet are sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And so that's exactly where we are in many of these instances. Some, just a few people are sincerely, I guess referring to that particular phrase, but most of them is conscientious stupidity. And so, you know, when I think of people saying a phrase like that, which is absolutely offensive, let's just start there. Number two, it's wrong. Black women are some of the most educated women in the entire country, no matter who we are talking about. So when we think about the conversation around talent acquisition, knowing full well on the third rail that we've hired a whole number of mediocre white men, for real. So we never have that conversation in totality. We never have that statement in totality of what it is around building high-performing teams. There is not a person that I know who is in this space who wants to hire a mediocre team. No one. Like, I don't know anyone who wakes up and says and sets out on their course that mediocrity is what it is that we are trying to build in an organization. And so anyone who is saying that, they are dangerous, they are disingenuous, and to me, they are caustic to your organization hitting its bottom line. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, Torin. And a follow-up to this particular question or statement. So when we're talking about bringing talent into the organization, those of you who have developed talent acquisition strategies, you know that, you know, it's all about, or partly about, a diverse slate. What do you do in those instances where the hiring manager says, I don't have time to wait for a diverse candidate? Or they say, I have all of the candidates I need. I don't want to delay my hiring process for a diverse candidate. So, Cindy, go ahead.
Yes, sure. So I was just going to add, I mean, I think that there's also something to be said for taking a look at your bar, okay, because chances are it's overrun with bias, referrals, and nepotism. So if you're thinking you already have an established candidate slate, although it be although be it a homogenous one, whether highly white male or absence of gender or diversity or racial diversity or any other kind, you know, I say chances are you're missing out and you are inadvertently lowering your own bar, and that hiring people of various backgrounds is actually raising the bar for the quality of the role and what can be accomplished by broadening our perspective to benefit from many different ways of thinking to tackle really difficult challenges and continue to innovate on behalf of our customers, our users, and a highly evolving market that's hard to keep up with. Also, it prevents us from paddling around in the same tiny candidate pool, which everyone is competing for, which results in bloated compensation as well, that's beyond market band by expanding our talent pool. So there's a lot of reasons why one might want to, even if it does cost a little bit more time in filling the role and they think they have an established candidate slate that's already strong, still consider complementing that candidate slate with other backgrounds and pausing and reflecting and saying, am I setting myself up at the onset before making this decision with truly an expansive approach to hiring for the best role?
So there was a follow-up to that. So not necessarily understanding the delay. So a lot of times what happens is we get the candidate slate and we feel, or it looks as though, again, another not so great way to go about the recruiting process, but it looks as though there aren't any diverse candidates in that. And then the hiring manager says, I don't want to wait, I have the candidates I need. So what they're essentially saying is, I don't want to drag this process out solely for the point of bringing in a diverse candidate. So they're saying that if I'm going to bring diverse candidates into my pool, it's going to extend my hiring process.
Tiffany, can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely, Torin, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's, I think in terms of optimizing the process, it comes down to being more proactive versus reactive. And so even in the typing of that comment in the chat, and certainly I'm not directing it to any one particular person, but it's a matter of when we get off of this webinar, this experience here today, it's about going back to our team and saying we need to prioritize the hiring process. Easy jobs, you may put them in box number 1. Harder jobs, you put them in box number 2, box number 3, box number 4, and be more strategic about how we are assigning and assessing our resources to that. And so for the ones that are really hard, we know that we may not hire that many people. We start to build those relationships now. You don't wait until the requisition is generated by the hiring manager. It's really about how we prioritize our time, how we configure our hiring teams. And so for me, diversity is not so much so around delaying or slowing down the process. It only happens that way when we have been reactive in our posture. We are at a moment right now where we can become more proactive, more strategic. And if we do that, we will put ourselves in a far better position.
Excellent point, Torin. Thank you. Great conversation. I want to pivot just a little bit here and go on to our next poll question. So Jason, if you'll put that up on the screen. We'll take a minute to read through that poll and respond. I have complete confidence that my organization's end-to-end recruiting and hiring process is fair, equitable, and inclusive. Yes or no? I have complete confidence that my organization's end-to-end recruiting and hiring process is fair, equitable, and inclusive. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. So majority of the respondents say no, they don't have that confidence, which leads us into our next topic of conversation. So we'll move on to our next question. And Cindy, I'll pose this one to you first. So we know that recruiting and talent acquisition and our hiring processes are prone to bias, and in some organizations it could be categorized as racist, even with the best of intentions. So from job descriptions, determining qualifications, to reviewing resumes, and untrained and unskilled interviewers. So we've seen all of this. if you had to pick one thing, just one of those items, what would you highlight as an opportunity for those that are listening to consider as they reevaluate their interview and selection process? So what one thing, where should they focus first?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I strongly feel like we could probably spend the whole time just on this question, but you're forcing me to pick one thing. And I'm cheating slightly because it's one thing, but many at the same time, paradoxically. So recruiting and hiring are some of the most vulnerable talent processes that exist at a company, okay? They're just inherently vulnerable, and there's many points of failure from beginning to end where things can go wrong, where we can have the chance to miss a chance to be more inclusive here and less biased. So I think that there's many points within that process to create belonging instead. From the beginning of when the role is even created and the JD is created, and you have that first intake meeting as a recruiter with a hiring manager, just from that early stage, it's a chance to really understand what goals do they have to use this role as an actionable opportunity to advance diversity on that hiring manager's team. And it comes down to the language in the JD. Have we checked it to ensure that there's nothing in there that inadvertently deters people from different groups from even wanting to apply? Have we looked at the criteria, and instead of overstating the criteria, 10 criteria, really examined critically what are the critical success factors and what's the icing on the cake and nice to have here? All the research we know around women, for example, with not applying to jobs if there's many things listed there and they need 9 of them and not 10 of them. I mean, the second I learned that little bit of research, it changed the way I search for jobs completely. And I am the more critical one when it comes to, I think this is important for me to have, and I can learn this before I apply. And so everyone's not doing that though, right? It's not until you kind of realize that you can do that as a candidate. So what can we control as a hiring manager or as a recruiter on that end of it? You know, and also because all decision making is prone to bias, like do we, you know, if we have great talent at the top of the funnel, shepherding and sustaining it throughout the process, because we can't afford for poor mistakes to happen and poor misses in that process. There's a finite talent pool, and there won't be more pools tomorrow. So we have to care for it, nurture it, and be thoughtful about those decision making points. And the final thing I want to say here is really around an overlooked element, which is cultural competence and global cultural norms. So oftentimes we'll over-index on things in interviews like eye contact or extroverted personalities and expressive communication styles, as if, you know, those are just like the standard of potential and leadership. These are all preferences. They're not by any means a standard, okay? There's no right or wrong. But we might value these norms more than other styles or misinterpret them as a lack of interest or capability. There are people who come from groups and cultures for whom it would be absolutely rude to make direct eye contact, especially with someone more superior to them, like a hiring manager. And so there's people who are neurodivergent, who there are neurologically based reasons why they wouldn't make eye contact or why they might need a moment to process the reaction to a question and not be super expressive. So don't accept mediocre reasons like this for rejecting a candidate. Probe further and ask, what do you mean by that? Say more about that. Why are they not a fit? What about that experience level isn't conducive to the role? Don't settle.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. And Torin, posing the same question to you, one place you would recommend a talent acquisition team start?
I don't know. I just want to pick up real quick on Carla's point of running through the JD. One of the things that I tend to do in terms of really trying to work with hiring managers is I will ask them, what's the one thing you need in this candidate that's not reflected in the job description? Give me the one thing that you need. And what I'm trying to do is get them to move away from the job description in totality, and let's talk about building it differently. Let's really build it as to what it is that we are looking for. And so I have found greater success in working backwards versus working from the front, which is the way that we historically have developed job descriptions. That's number one. Number two, I think it is imperative that organizations go back and look at their data. We talk so much around data. And so what I would say is that you should be looking at your exit interviews, or you should be looking at that interview process over the last 24 months. Where have candidates fallen out? And I'm not saying underrepresented candidates. Where have people fallen out? And then get into the specificity of the data. Where have underrepresented candidates fallen out in that process? And you got to double, triple down on how do we mitigate risk, mitigate the fact that people are falling at that particular level. It may mean we need to put more people in the process there. It may mean we need to have another set of eyes observing. It may mean we need a different library of questions. Something is happening. So let's focus exactly where the data tells us that we're focusing. I think too often we're taking a dart and we're throwing it instead of really pinpointing what it is about our process that we can amplify.
Excellent. Thank you, Torrin. And just a side note, if you all go into the comments, you'll see, I believe it was Jesse Howard posted a link to a tool that you may want to look into. And then Torrin, I'm going to go back to you for just a moment. As you were talking about job descriptions, another comment asked about resources that we can use as we're developing job descriptions. Do you have any recommendations there?
No, I don't. I'm smiling. I've been recruiting since 1998, and I've never shared a job description with a candidate, ever. Because for me, historically, job descriptions always tend to look backwards. And certainly I understand where they fit in the process, but historically, the job description, 70, 80% of them that you find online are a historical view of what a person has done. My story and my way of recruiting is more ambitious, more what we are going towards. What is it that we are trying to create? How can we embrace and build that innovation, that creative contribution that you have? And you sometimes can't put that in a job description. So I'm really focused, Tiffany, unfortunately, on the narration. I like to have conversation, tell story, talk to people.
Excellent. Thank you. We will move on to the next topic within this, the umbrella of DE&I here. And Jason, we do have another poll, if you'll put that up there. So my organization has solid programs in place to increase underrepresented minority hiring. Yes or no? We should have the results there, and majority says no. So in my opinion, I think this goes back to, and I think Torrin mentioned this a moment ago about, focusing on a strategy and focusing on the, how are we feeding into it, not doing the just in time, oh crap, now I need to add a diverse candidate. So we'll get into this topic as well. I do have one question, and I'll pose this for Cindy. It was brought up in the comments in the chat dialogue about how are we categorizing, or what are we defining as a diverse candidate?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It feels like it actually aligns with one of the questions we have stated later in the panel, but I'm happy to go there now. So, like, diverse place requirements are great tools. I know in the chat I saw some references to like Nike and Accenture. Many companies have them in place. I think there's a few watch outs there too, that relate to this question, which is, first of all, you have to start from a place of really clearly understanding your problem statement and what's the objective you're trying to solve for. That's going to vary based on the business unit or the organization. So for some organizations, it might be, we need to double down on our focus on women. And for others, it may be a blend. It may be, okay, we need to focus on women, Black and Latinx talent, and so forth. And so being clear and precision-based at the front end around what are you actually trying to solve for? What is the gap that we are collectively working towards as a business unit leader, as a hiring manager, as a recruiting team, is important at the onset. The other thing is, we absolutely cannot say, and I'm putting like my legal risk management compliance hat on here, we're only going to interview so-and-so from these demographics, right? We simply cannot do that. Everybody has to have an equitable chance to compete for the role. And also I can sense that based on like kind of what we talked about with lowering the bar, same thing with diverse slate requirements, where you're going to have this, you can almost forecast that you're going to have this opposition or straw man argument around, well, that's hiring quotas and we don't want to use that either. So it's really important that there's alignment at the front end here. Like, do we agree that these are our gaps in your BU? How else do you plan to solve for them? If not through the actionable roles you have open in your hiring plan this year at these levels. And then once you kind of get past that hurdle, really collaborating on making sure you could manage and measure something like that. Be mindful that some diverse slate requirements at companies, and I've seen this happen, if you don't have that precision-based approach about what you're actually trying to achieve and what gap you're solving for, you can inadvertently compound an already existing representation problem. Meaning, if you just do it as a blanket slate of all gender and POC, but you're already well represented in some areas, you might end up increased hiring on those areas that weren't even a gap to begin with, and then your gaps are still remaining. So what have we really gained there, right? So, you know, I want to definitely give others a chance to weigh on this question. It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cindy. And that kind of gets into the question that we do have with regard to not just the slates themselves, but the, you know, increasing that underrepresentation and what is a minority candidate. So their organizations are all over the board when it comes to where they are in their DE&I commitment, their recruiting strategies. So Carla, I'll pose this to you and kind of carry off of what Cindy was saying. What recommendations or advice do you have with regard to where people can start? So are they should they consider diverse slate? Should they look at the Rooney Rule, the Parity Pledge? Where can people start, or what should they consider as they're in those early stages of their commitment to DE&I?
I believe that the most important place to start is being honest with yourself and your organization. If you were crawling, if I put everything into baby stages or college stages. So if you are just born into this DE&I world, or you are just now having legitimate conversations and putting actions behind things, you are a baby or you are a freshman, and be okay with naming that you are a baby and that you are a freshman, and being able to name that for talent who is coming through your door to interview. Because one, I think something that we really overlook in a not great way is the fact that, especially with younger talent, and I'm talking Gen Z, I'm not talking millennials, because millennials are 24 to 38, so stop talking about them like we're freshmen in college. It's not the thing. But for Gen Z, they are going to ask the tough questions. They are going to ask, what are your, diversity numbers? What is, why didn't I see anyone who looked like me if they're a person of color, or whatever it might be. And so being able to start off a conversation with, we are crawling, and we know that it's a journey and that we are going to get there. But being able to pose that before it's even asked, and for all TA teams to have that language. So have your 30-second elevator speech around what inclusion looks like at your organization. But I also do think that so many use the Rooney Rule, and I cannot remember where I heard this from. It's the woman's faces in my head. I promise it is statistically sound. But a woman that I heard speak at a conference actually said that the Rooney Rule doesn't work great for majority of places. We actually need to have over 50% people of color or women for slates, because when that happens, we're 80-ish% more likely to hire a person of color or a woman than if we do the Rooney Rule, because everyone's waiting for the Rooney Rule, or everyone's waiting, they know what's going to come. And so really looking into what research looks like. But if you know that places are doing the Rooney Rule and you don't think that that's going, your people. If you know that putting another 2 women in front of them, whatever color they are, is not going to help, then be honest with that and be able to say like, okay, this is how we're changing this around. And I wanted to add of something that I would put as what TA teams can focus on. I'm going to do a little bit further into the process and say, I personally believe that rubrics are so helpful when you are talking with a candidate. So being able to, even if you know it's going to need to be modified over and over again, if personality traits are actually important to the role, figure out how to measure that or how to have it on a rubric. Don't let folks be out here doing whatever they want and saying, I got really good energy from this person. Ask them, what does that good feeling you have about this candidate mean? How can we put this into the rubric so that it's actually measured? So that's where I'd go with that. Sorry. I know you all felt it. I was getting a little hype inside. So
you just got an amen in the comments. So point made. There are a lot of great questions and comments. So in between your responses, panelists, if you have a moment to respond to some of those, I won't be able to get to all of them. We'll move on to our next poll here. So Jason, if you will throw up that poll question, we'll get to that one. And that will lead into our next conversation. There is a disconnect between the external Black Lives Matter statement our company made compared to what exists internally, yes or no? Or my company didn't publish one. Poll is in progress, and so there is a disconnect between the external Black Lives Matter statement our company made compared to what exists internally. So yes, about a third, and then 41% no, and then the remaining third, just over a third, my company did not publish or post a BLM commitment or message. So that gets to our next question, and we'll kick this one off with Torrin. So there are some companies that have had conversations, be it internally or external messages, and in some cases there is a clear disconnect between the message that the company sent to the public versus what is going on internally. So when recruiting underrepresented talent, how would you address questions regarding culture? And let's say someone does say, I saw that your organization posted a statement about Black Lives Matter. Tell me, is that true in your organization? How can we address those questions around culture?
Yeah, it's a whole lot there, man. Tiffany, I don't even know where to start. Let me start here. We talk about culture.
Can someone note the time we left Torrin speechless?
Yeah, so let me tell you, we talk about culture, but what I say to people is that people don't start inside of your organization. People start inside of their circumstance and their condition. When I wake up in the morning, I'm waking up in my circumstance. I'm waking up in my condition. And I'm bringing all of that to the organization. And my hope is that belonging is something that welcomes me. And so I am able to walk into that organization and feel like I absolutely belong. When we talk about these disconnected statements, you got to recognize the reason why we are here, Tiffany, is because we have, far too many of us, allowed injustices to happen in silence. People haven't spoken up. And so now that we are here in this moment because of the pandemic and COVID and because of George Floyd, we cannot discount the dear brother George Floyd who lost his life. That is the reason why we are here. And so now that we have people speaking up because of the injustice, I want to say to you, the listener, the viewer, the attendee, same thing that I said in a panel that I opened up this morning. You know what the phrase, we will never forget, resonate. You know what that reminds you of. We will never forget takes most people back to September 11, 2001. So I want you to not forget this moment that we are in right now. I want you to be honest with the fact that if in fact your organization has a disconnected statement and posture, then you work hard to connect it. You build that social imperative and that business methodology that says that D&I is important in our organization. It can no longer be a feel-good posture. It's got to be something that says it makes sense in the organization and it can feel good. And we can do both. I think too many of us have fallen subject to complacency and mediocrity. And that's unacceptable. Someone asked a question in the comment, how do we feel about blind resumes? Fine, if you want to put some technology in place that blinds the resumes, knock yourself out. But the fact of the matter is, once you allow me to matriculate through the process, you still got to see that I'm black and beautiful. So if your process is messed up, then the technology really ain't doing us all that good. So we got to really be serious and genuine about being in this moment. And the last thing that I'm going to say to you, Tiffany, this is going to be controversial, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm 51. This has never happened in my recruiting career since 1998. We've never been at this moment right here, right now. And I'm going to demand every single thing that I want for people that are underrepresented. I'm not asking for permission. I'm coming through demanding that we do a better job in what it is that we say we care about. And if you are working with me as an organization, you already know my reputation. We are demanding what it is that we want. That's not excluding anyone. That simply says enough with the bullshit. You can keep the press release. I need you to get down to business. Fair enough? Fair enough.
Thank you, Torrin. Carla, if Carla were sitting next to me, she'd be pushing me out of the way to get to the microphone. So, Carla, go ahead.
I want to add on with everyone. I am a churchgoer and I am also in a Baptist church. So I'm just going to say amen and amen on that. But I fully agree. And so if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you probably already know my feelings around this, because I made a statement probably a week after George Floyd's murder in particular around, I said shame on you to business leaders that my friends work at who had to come to me as their D&I friend in order to figure out how to navigate their spaces, how to have a conversation, how to tell their company that their response was whack. And that's just not okay. People need to, this is the time, as Torrin was saying, we can pour money anywhere right now that we're asking. So put your foot to the pedal and be able to do that. But I do believe that this is where soft skills win out for me. I don't think of it as a soft skill, but I am very strong in a lot of soft skill areas. So ask your people what they actually thought or feel when you were doing press releases or whatever it might be, especially when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement. Qualitative input is going to be key and be able to help you steer and guide wherever you're going. If you don't have any Black folks in your organization, especially with Black Lives Matter, someone internally should not be or shouldn't have written any PR response or be holding the convo for your organization. Bring someone in, period. Put a period on it, and also tell them, apologize to them that you are asking them to carry all the weight of that because you don't have any Black or brown folks in your company to do so. But be honest with candidates, because Black Twitter is real. Text change in the Black community are real. And if you can do better, and you know you could do better, especially if your response was lacking or there was no response, say that you need to do better. Own that and make sure that everyone on the talent acquisition team is on the same page around that. People don't have to agree on ideologies of things, but you can agree whether or not a response that you had to a community that you may not be a part of, how they felt, if you're hearing it from your people or you are hearing it from outside. So take those qualitative responses seriously, because people are going to tell you one way or another, whether it's anonymously in Fishbowl. I don't know if every industry has Fishbowl, whether it's anonymously there, whether it's in a text chat, whatever it is, there is always going to be someone who has heard the voices of the majority and who is going to be real with you. So find those people and use your voices. And if you don't have any Black or brown folks, you probably shouldn't be releasing anything about Black Lives Matter, to be completely honest. And really, it should just be, your statement should be, we have to do better.
Spot on, Carla. And that, go ahead, Cindy, go ahead. No, don't be sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I do want to add just one thing regarding that. All of this is a great conversation. Again, it could be its own panel discussion, but I think it is important. One of the things I learned early on in this experience was also like balancing urgency to act in response to this environment with thoughtfully listening to what is most meaningful to those most directly affected. And I think, and that's how you avoid doing things that are performative, or even like you have great intent that doesn't equal impact. It's seen as or felt as performative, and so now we've still not made much of a difference despite making the statement, which is, you know, which was the first step, right? So I think it's important to, like, to Carla's point, what are your employees of color saying? And then also, like, one of the things we did to get that qualitative and not just the, you know, the anecdotal responses to those things is, we worked the question into our most recent engagement survey, which just actually closed out this last week. And for the first time, we have DE&I questions, but we worked in specifically one around how employees feel, you know, addressing issues around racial inequity in the workplace, because it's been so long that people have been indoctrinated to compartmentalize this topic as if it has no place at work. And we know more and more that we cannot afford to do that any longer, and it absolutely belongs in the workplace. And you know, despite how uncomfortable it might make people, right? We owe it to our employees and to our customers and to our communities to understand and address that experience. And so the engagement question helped a lot for us to get a temperature check on, do people feel like we're doing the most meaningful things, or do we need to relook at that? Are we responding appropriately to meet our employees' needs? Do they even feel comfortable just because we ask them in a letter to bring their whole selves to work and bring their humanity to the door? Are they actually logging in each day feeling like they could really do that? And it gives you some clues, right?
Absolutely. And with that, Cindy, I want to ask the audience or the participants this question that directly ties to the comments you have just made. So Jason, if you'll post that, it ties in really well. So as a talent acquisition professional, I feel equipped and confident to lead the conversation, challenge the status quo, and influence hiring managers on DE&I hiring, yes or no? So in your role right now, are you confident that you can lead the conversation and influence your hiring managers on DE&I hiring?
Be honest, everybody. Just gonna say that.
Yep. So majority, no. So with that, in addition to what Cindy was saying, Torrin, I'll ask you, for your insight, knowing this, knowing that many of us are not empowered, so to speak, or we don't feel like we are equipped to have that conversation, what can we do to encourage our managers to embrace DE&I? Not just, we're talking about specifically in the recruitment process because we are TA leaders, but this could be at any point throughout an employee's life cycle. What can we do to encourage hiring leaders to embrace DE&I?
Yeah, so I think it's important that we understand that in the conversation of inclusion, it's everyone. It's not just Black and brown people. It's not just relegated to race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. That diversity has a couple of layers. And so, yes, certainly it starts with that representation of people of a certain hue that may not be inside of the workplace or of a certain gender. but that if we have a robust and well expanded conversation, we'll look at diversity in terms of geography. We'll look at diversity in terms of products and services that our organization is developing. We'll certainly look at that creative contribution, that innovation that we are trying to put inside of the organization. Naturally, that comes down to headcount management. I think organizations really have people have more than enough data research, papers, Catalyst Group, Kaleidoscope, McKinsey, Deloitte, Boston Consult. We can go down a list of periodicals, white papers, blog posts, YouTube videos. So the conversation and convincing the business case, that is kind of like the Rooney Rule for me. It's like something I don't even talk about. I think that the message is already there. So number one, I say start with a conversation that makes white men feel like they are included in such. So I focus on and share with people, and I put it in the comment, go out and find the research done by Kenji Yoshino and Deloitte on covering from 2013, 2014. That's a great place to start, great place to help every person to understand that they are included in the conversation of inclusion. And then the second thing is to simply recognize that where we are right now, if you move away from gender and race and you go to the area where I just mentioned, geography, products, services, creative contribution, innovation, and headcount management, then you will recognize that we really do need a broad swath of people in our organizations. Right now, one of the things that are paining a number of organizations that are building facial recognition technology are masks. So if the mask can't see my whole face, I already was at a disadvantage the way that the technology was being built because not enough Black and brown people were in these rooms. But now I'm putting a mask on. White men are putting a mask on. White women are putting a mask on. Everyone is wearing a mask. It renders all of these technologies a little bit suspect. So we should be thinking, how do we make sure that we are building the best organization that we possibly can? And no one has a monopoly on that creativity.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Torin. This next question I really like because I've seen it, I've heard it, I've had conversations about it. And Carla, I'll pose this to you. So we're talking about DE&I, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. With that, what is the difference between equity and equality?
Okay, so I don't spread this around. There's a lot of us on this call, but don't spread this around. I am not a fan of using the example about like being at a party and all of the things because I just don't think it fits. So after I do get done chatting with this, I'm going to try to find a YouTube link that explains this because one of my friends really likes this bicycle example, and I think it's great as well. I'm going to use the example that she couldn't put her finger on why she didn't enjoy it as much, but she said it's still good. So this is how it goes in my head. All right, so if we're thinking of if myself and Tiffany live in two separate towns, but we both have a grocery store that is an hour away, or not an hour, sorry, a mile away, 1 mile away from us. That means that we have equality in the fact that we have access to a grocery store. Equity would look like the city making sure that there are paved roads for driving, that the sidewalks and crosswalks are painted on, that there are buses and bus routes that get people to and from, and that there are various means of transportation to be able to get to and from said grocery store. Because then anyone who is driving, anyone who is who has different accessibility needs in terms of a wheelchair or a walker, anyone who doesn't have a car, they can all get there. That means that we have set up into play exactly what needs to be done for anyone to be able to get to that grocery store. Now we're removing whether or not we can afford things at the grocery store for right now, but on an equity and equality level, equality is having that grocery store within a mile to reach, but equity is all of the layers that are set up to be able to allow anyone to get to that grocery store. Does that make sense?
Can I jump in
Okay,
real
I see my
quick?
other folks. Thank
Yeah,
you, Torrin. Add on.
And this is not in any way to compete with Carla. I want to just give a different example. So from an equality standpoint, it's handing every single person on this webinar a size 8 woman's pair of shoes. Every single person gets a size 8 woman pair of shoes. That's equality. Equity says that Torrin is not going to be able to operate in that size 8 pair of shoes. So I'm going to need some adjustments. I'm going to need some different things to be done to help me to be able to move in those shoes, to work in those shoes, to stand in those shoes. That's what equity is. So equality is everyone having the same opportunity. Equity says that we might need to invest a little bit more. We may need to extend the parameter a little bit more, but we're doing it because we know that in the end, it's going to give us the result that we're looking for.
Excellent, Torrin. Thank you. We have just a couple of minutes left. So with that, great conversation, lots and lots of comments in the chat. I'm going to look to see and work with Jason to see if we can capture that in some way and continue the conversation in all of the other social channels that we have. So thank you to Carla. Thank you to Cindy, and thank you, Torrin, and I will turn it over to Jason. And before I do that, thank you to all of you who participated. The conversation, the questions have been incredible. Thank you for that. And Jason, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Tiffany, and echo Carla, Cindy, Torrin, thank you so much for investing the time with all of us today to have this very important conversation. And as Tiffany alluded to, this is just the beginning of the conversation, and there's so much more work to be done. So we will continue that online through various channels. As I mentioned, the webinar recording will be sent out later on today to everyone that registered. And wanted to one last time thank AllyO again for their sponsorship of the Recruiters Network. And to stay up to date with future events, you can check out our website, www.recruiters.network.